Good morning, everybody.
Paula, would you sit in front?
Because I like seeing this. It fits my culture.
And do you want to?
Good morning, everybody. We will get started on time, so let me invite everyone to come on up and take both the laminated prayer and also our text for today.
I was just going to ask you to pass the mic, but it seems like people have.
Yes, exactly. Okay, thank you, Andrew. So thank you, Andrew. We've got laminated prayers and blessings, and we have texts, and then we will get started. Good morning, everybody. And want to welcome all of our friends who are on live stream as well. This would have been a nice Shehechianu moment other than the war, that we are back in Gan in person, at least some of us studying Torah together for the first time since the pandemic. And it is very special to be in person with those who are here, and very special to be with our friends online. So let's begin by thanking God for the gift of learning Torah together. Page 63, as we always do. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. V'ha'arev na Adonai Eloheinu et divrei Toratcha b'finu, u'b'fi amcha beit Yisrael, v'nihiyah anachnu v'tzatza'enu v'tzatza'ei amcha beit Yisrael, kulanu yod'ei shemecha, v'lomdei Toratecha lishma, Baruch atah Adonai hamelamed Torah li'amo Yisrael. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim, v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. So good morning, everybody. I obviously want to start by talking about the war, and want to begin by just first inviting some comments and reflections about how you feel and the kind of feelings that Saturday stirred in you. Interestingly enough, I'm not sleeping at all, and I was up at 2 in the morning. I've got a number of nephews who are poised to enter Gaza. Doing hand-to-hand combat in Gaza is just inexpressibly dangerous. And I was wondering if there's any wisdom from the Hartman Institute. The war just started. And sure enough, there's a podcast that Daniel Hartman and Yossi Klein Halevi, and it was short. Their idea is they used to do, before the war, a 45-minute, 50-minute podcast on a lot of stuff, and they would have Alana Stein-Hain do text study as well. This was just Daniel and Yossi Klein Halevi, and they began most of the 19-minute podcast by just talking about how they were feeling and how the events of Saturday and the day subsequent to that made them feel. So I want to first just make some space to invite people to talk about how you felt and how you feel. And then I want to pivot to an observation about the rally yesterday at the Boston Commons, where a number of folks from the shul were there. A number of us went on the T, and then we'll do some text study. Let me just first open it up, and I've got a microphone because we're on live stream as well. If anybody wants to speak, I'm going to present you with a microphone so that our friends on live stream can hear you. Anyone want to share how you are feeling, thinking during this this very historically challenging week for the Jewish people? Anybody? Debbie Ginsburg. And then if you can give the microphone to Alan Zatherbury.
Well, there are a lot of emotions, feeling sad, hopeless, angry. And I do place some blame on Netanyahu and his government. It was 50 years ago, Yom Kippur War, and here we are. You would think the Iron Dome would be more effective, not against 2,000 rockets, but there's something just basically wrong with Netanyahu and his government. Golda Meir was, she sacrificed her political career 50 years ago. And I think the only good thing to come out of this is sacrificing Netanyahu. Finally, maybe he'll get out, and the soldiers would have been more prepared. The intelligence, we don't know yet, but maybe there was a lot of problems and people were angry with the government and not working as hard as they should have been. A lot will come out in the next few years. And I was at the rally yesterday.
Right.
It was heartening to see thousands of people and hearing so many local politicians in support.
Yeah, thank you, Debbie. I think Alan Zatherbury, your hand was up next. And then Wendy. Alan.
It's difficult to follow your remarks because you're echoing pretty much my feelings totally. It's the worst part is the total helplessness and anger and wanting to lash out with the inability to lash out and to realize the situation is not going to get better. It's going to get worse before it gets better. And that's the sad part. A lot of innocent lives have been sacrificed for something that I just don't understand.
Thank you, Alan. Wendy Landon, excuse the reach, Sally.
I have found it terrifying, and I think Rachel Fish last night on a call verbalized the terror that I've been feeling, in which she said, this is not 67 or 73, this was a pogrom that we have not seen since before World War II. And I feel it here. We have our rallies. I was at a funeral, but I see it in London where my daughter lives, where people rallied, go Hamas. I see it at Penn, which was historically a Jewish haven among universities with their Palestinian rights writers seminar where anti-Semitic people were allowed to voice their tropes. And I don't know how we put the genie back in the bottle. And I will just say, on the other side, a hopeful sense was some of Bruce's colleagues at BI who are Israeli and had senior positions in Soroka, which is in the south that helps a lot of the people coming out of Gaza and fighting. They used to head the ICU, and they all ran back to Israel to help. And so that's a hopeful thing that
Right.
they could have stayed here, and back they go on the first flight out.
Right, 100% of reservists are serving. Yeah. Any other preliminary thoughts? Paula Apsel.
So I was listening to the BBC on my way here, and it was a correspondent talking about the damage in Gaza. I thought I would drive the car right off the road. I just felt this fury that, yes, of course, these are people, but then their governors or their rulers or whoever these terrorists are shouldn't have done this. What do you think is going to happen to your own people? And I can just see the world reaction that Israel is reacting disproportionately. You know, you can practically write the stories now. And it just fills me with fury.
I hear you. Thank you, Paula. Other framing comments? Anybody? So I want to just start by making two observations. I think this is unquestionably the hardest week for the Jewish people since the Holocaust. And the Saturday, October 7th, the Simchat Torah massacre was the hardest single day for the Jewish people since the Holocaust. And it's for two reasons. One is that you've already adverted to, the atrocities that happened and are happening against our people, of total innocents being slaughtered, raped, mutilated, caged, children, babies, teens, Holocaust survivors, grandparents. It's, and what makes this situation different from 41 through 45 is it's all captured, or much of it's captured on video. And so there's just an endless doom loop. I was watching Lester Holt last night, and they showed. I try not to watch this stuff because it's just, I can't take it. It's just too much for me. But they showed this 25-year-old woman named Noah. I forget her last name, who was at the music festival, and she was captured. She's a beautiful woman. I can't even imagine what she's going through, what her parents are going through. So there's a whole level of horror and loss of life, that likes of which we have not experienced as a people since the Holocaust. And it's a pogrom, and Israel was supposed to be the place where pogroms no longer happen to us. And here was a pogrom that happened in Israel. And part of the complex of emotion is anger that it happened, of course, directed at Hamas, but also at the intelligence failures. Like how could it have happened to Israel and Israelis today? The second level of horribleness is the Jew hatred that this fuels. It's like throwing kerosene on a fire. And when you think that 5 miles from here, at Harvard University, some 31 organizations wholly support Hamas. They stand with Hamas. They say that, I just close the door, that Israel is solely to blame. Excuse me. That adding insult to injury, the insult of Jew hatred to the injury of murdering Jews, is just very Holocausty. And it makes one realize that all the hatred that gave rise to the Holocaust didn't get resolved by the Holocaust. It's richer and deeper than ever, and it's 5 miles from here. So what I wanted to talk to you about today is a very specific question that is, it's a soul question, it's a heart question, it's a what you wish for and pray for question, and it's a little unsettling, and I'm a little, it feels a little awkward to raise it, but I'll tell you why I feel comfortable raising it, which is, should we hope that Gaza gets reduced to rubble? And do we just want condign punishment, fire for fire, that Gaza is destroyed, including inevitably the civilians who are in Gaza who will be destroyed with it? And just to frame it out, those of you who were at the Boston Commons rally yesterday, there were 2 clarifying moments. When Senator Markey said this is a time for de-escalation, meaning don't reduce Gaza to rubble, let's find a peace agreement, let's yada, yada, yada. When he said time for de-escalation, he was roundly and loudly booed. So it's not just me kind of hoping for reducing Gaza to ruins. And then when Congressman Auchincloss said, hey, Israel never said to America on 9/12, time to de-escalate, he was roundly and loudly applauded. So what I want to do is I want to share with you, I want to frame this out by talking about the Holocaust overtones of last Saturday and continuing. And then I want to share a text with you from that's from the book of Samuel, Shmuel, Olive, and it's a sacred text. We read it as a haftarah, in which God commands genocide. And God says, fight fire with fire. It's about Amalek. They attacked us. We should attack them. They were unsparing of us. We should be unsparing of them. I want to talk about how that haftarah has historically made you feel and how it makes you feel today. Then I want to talk about the cost, the spiritual cost, the emotional cost of hatred, and how skewed moral sensibilities happen when we feel hatred. And then I want to end with a quote from David Wolpe, which was in his Twitter feed last night, and which to me is a cautionary note. So I want to just surface real questions about how I know that I'm feeling, but based on the very crowded rally yesterday, and based on the applause and the booing, many other people are feeling. So let's turn to page 1. This is the, and again, a lot of this I'm going to be asking you how you feel about what we're reading. Oh, if you don't have a handout, please let me know, and I will be happy to pass one out. Okay, there you go. And the minute you get your own for the same low price. When you pay membership to Temple Emmanuel, you each get your own. You each get your own text. So everybody, it comes with. Okay, so this is from the Haftarah. From the prayer book, the Siddur. And actually, at breakfast this morning, Phyllis Gordon made the observation that the prayer we say on Yom HaShoah applies to today's events. So I'm just going to read it. This is Yom HaShoah prayer, but it's for October 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th of 2023. Adonai, our God, comfort the remnant of your people Israel, a brand plucked from the fire. For a cruel enemy arose to destroy us, to murder every Jew, young and old, women and children, saying, come, let us annihilate them, so that the name of Israel might no longer be uttered. The waters engulfed us, our tormentors fed us bitter poison. Alas, we are undone, for our source of comfort is yet far off. Recalling these things, I weep. But you will not forget us eternally. That's the Yom HaShoah prayer, and it feels so right for the Holocaust. And honestly, at least to me, it feels so right for this week. So I just wanted to invite anybody who wanted to share any thoughts about that. Harry.
Just coming in, we heard Congressman Seth Moulton on the radio, and he was upset that Harvard was quiet about these groups. And he said, if these groups or any groups had blamed the United States for 9/11, would Harvard have remained quiet? And he said, you can be concerned about the Palestinians and still condemn acts of terrorism.
Right.
He said they're not mutually exclusive. And I think that's where morality has fallen down. Not that long ago when this mapping project came out, and Gann Academy was on it. And the principal of Gann Academy, I don't know her name, didn't say that was a bad thing. She just said, I was surprised Gann Academy was on it. We have a nuanced approach to Israel. That was her problem. We didn't deserve to be on the mapping project. She never said the mapping project was not proper. So I think, people's senses have to be wakened up. And I think, Israel, I mean, as difficult as it is, and it's extremely difficult, you have to keep a clear head about this. You're going to have to go into Gaza. You're going to have to take it over. You're going to have to eliminate Hamas. You want to do it with as few casualties as possible, and you want to do it with as little collateral damage as is possible. I think Israel will have to go in. They'll have to tell Palestinian residents to move to another part of Gaza. They'll have to level one small area at a time, because if you leave all these high-rise buildings standing and you want Israeli soldiers to walk in narrow alleys where the enemy has tunnels, where the area is booby-trapped, you're going to have enormous casualties. Hamas wants Israel to come in because Israel will have to fight by their game plan, on their terms. And I can't, Israel shouldn't fall into this trap. Take your time, think it out, and do what needs to be done. Otherwise, you'll have to repeat this constantly, forever.
Thank you, Harry. So the opening gambit here just is this week we all have a heaviness in our souls, a grief and an anxiety, and I think, I wasn't alive from 41 to 45, but that is what we're dealing with, which is, there was a last segment of Lester Holt last night, also strikes very close to home, another 5 miles, different 5 miles. Alon Troen is a professor at Brandeis, and he has a daughter who's very idealistic and noble and Zionist, and she married a man who's idealistic and noble and Zionist, and they were living down south by Sderot, and they have a young teenage son named Rotem, and their whole life was about building peace and building bridges. And they were slaughtered in their home on Simchat Torah morning. And their son, their teenage son, remarkably survived. But the fact that you could have two people who gave their life for peace and for coexistence, and, the Hamas people don't care, and they ended up slaughtered in the presence of their son, that's so shattering and so Holocausty. So I wanted to move to a response to that, which is the Haftarah for Shabbat Zachor. So you remember, from your Bible studies, that Amalek is the terrorist element in the Bible. And that Amalek, like Hamas, attacked the most weak and the most vulnerable. That's what they did. They attacked the most weak and the most vulnerable, which is what Hamas/Amalek did, going to civilians and kids at a music festival, etc. So this is the Haftarah. And I want to ask kind of two related questions. One is, you're all shul people, you've all encountered this Haftarah before. What did you think of this Haftarah last year? And what do you think of this Haftarah now? Okay, so I'll read this. Thus said the Lord of hosts, I am exacting the penalty for what Amalek did to Israel, for the assault he made upon them on the road, on their way. This is page 2 of the handout, For the assault he made upon them on the road, on their way up from Egypt. Now go, attack Amalek, and prescribe all that belongs to him. Spare no one, but kill alike men and women, infants and sucklings, oxen and sheep, camels and asses. And the word that we don't use every day is prescribe in Hebrew, v'hacharamtem, at kol asher lo. And so the JPS commentary says, proscribe, that is put to death. No human being who has been prescribed can be ransomed, he shall be put to death. In other words, kill everybody, including women and including children, including babies who are nursing at their mother's breast. Kill them all, thus says the Lord your God, right? Now, some part one question is, before Saturday, before the Simchat Torah massacre, what did you think of this text? Anybody? Paul, hold on a second.
I always thought it should have been eliminated.
And what was your rationale for that, Paul?
That collective punishment doesn't work
Right.
and is evil and is contrary to our very ethos. And in terms of what Harry said before, I agree with him completely, that Israel has to go in, has to destroy Hamas, has to do it so that as few as possible civilians are hurt.
Right. So, yeah, so Paul, I just want to note the dynamic tension in the first part and the second part of what you had to say. The first part of what you had to say is that Haftarah was always a moral embarrassment to most of us. I know that Rabbi Chill never read it for Shabbat Zachor. He didn't have bar mitzvah kids give speeches about it. We were embarrassed by it. We would say Shabbat Zachor, that's God commanding genocide. We don't believe in a God who commands genocide. That's what I always thought about it. It was a moral embarrassment. And the most I could do with it was, that was then, this is now. That, human thought had evolved and we're more moral and we're more ethical and we're more sensitive than we were in the biblical bloody times. We've advanced. It was a marker for distance traveled morally, how far we've come. The first part of what you had to say, Paul, that we don't like this text, resonates with that. Okay. Second part, there are Israeli soldiers poised to enter Gaza, including my nephews. When the IDF bombs Gaza and levels it and reduces it to rubble, inevitably they know that they are going to be killing civilians. It's just impossible not to. And so even though we don't speak the way God speaks in this Haftarah, and also because Hamas uses babies as shields. Hamas uses schools as shields. Hamas launches its nefarious stuff from civilian centers where there are children. Inevitably, we are going to be killing children in order to defend ourselves. That just is the reality. It's uncomfortable. Nobody wants to state it, but that is the reality. So now I find myself taking a fresh look at this Haftarah, which I've always eschewed, but now I'm thinking maybe uncomfortably enough, the Bible was onto something. So I would love to elicit some other opinions about this great complexity.
I think that, forgive me for saying this.
Yes.
But I think that now is not quite the time to make such severe criticisms or thoughts because the emotions are so open now. And thinking about this a few months from now, one may find that you look at things differently.
Perhaps we would, but we don't have the luxury of a few months because Israel is dropping bombs on Gaza as we speak. I mean, this is happening in real time. I find myself reflexively refreshing my screens to see what's happening in the war. So this is happening in real time. And the armies are poised there. Wendy, let me hand this to you.
It seems to me, in my Talmud studies, everything is how to live the best life that you can live, and using how to get through the everyday. And as I look at this now, this is to me saying not go out and do it, but war happens, war will happen, and move on with you're gonna kill people, you're gonna harm people, and it's just what you have to do to survive, and it's a way of letting people get, solace isn't the right word, but live with what they have to do to survive. Kind of like when you're in a plane and they say, put your own mask on first.
Right.
It's
Right. And those, by the way, so a couple things about that. I mean, you could also point out that depending on how you count that, I've heard the number 11, I've also heard the number 4, but there have been some number of wars with Hamas since the disengagement in 2005, and Israel has never done this before because it wanted to, avoid loss of civilian life on their side and loss of soldiers on our side. But this past Saturday made it clear that that's not a strategy, because leaving Hamas in power means moments like Saturday and days like now. By the way, I also want to note, this is a whole separate, longer conversation, but those of us who saw Oppenheimer, this is very Harry Truman. Very Harry Truman. This is very America. This is very our country. We dropped the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. We knew we were going to kill a lot of people. We knew we were going to kill babies. We knew we were going to kill old people. We knew we were going to kill civilians. And Harry Truman did not hesitate to do it because he had to save American GIs. And if he hadn't done it, how many American soldiers would have died doing hand-to-hand combat in Japan? And Harry Truman obviated that and saved all those lives. And so is that also the Haftarah? And is that also where we are at now? Wendy?
Just one question that, and I know it's complex and complicated, but it just seems to me as everyone looks at Israel and says, oh, they're going to kill the women and children, and oh, and all the neighboring countries say, oh, that's terrible. It is terrible. It is horrible. But nobody opens their borders. Nobody says, we'll let the women and children in.
Right.
Get them out. Israel drops leaflets.
Right.
Why won't anyone take the women and children and help protect them so that...
Yeah. So, any other comments? So we've talked about the kind of the Holocaust framing, the prayer for the Shoah, which is eerily reminiscent of now. We've talked about this very creepy, painful, horrible Haftarah that is also eerily resonant now. We've talked about the moral disquiet of thousands of Jewish Bostonians who booed a sitting senator for suggesting de-escalation and who cheered a congressman when he said no de-escalation, right? So now I want to flip the script. And I want to ask the question about in what ways might we be uncomfortable with comfort with this Haftarah? In what ways might we be uncomfortable with the violence that is surely coming? So I wanted to, and this is the part that is particularly painful, it's the Harvard thing. By the way, I called my brother-in-law at 3:30 this morning because I don't sleep. He's in Jerusalem. And you know what he said to me? He said, what's going on at Harvard? It's making the news here in Israel. And so this is, I don't want to even read it, but it's a statement by the Harvard-Palestine Solidarity Groups and holding Hamas blameless for rape, torture, mutilation, and the murder of civilians, which is surely a war crime. Hamas gets a pass, and Israel is entirely responsible, the only one to blame. And there are some 30 organizations from Harvard that endorse this. First, just want to pause on how this makes you feel, and I'll try to plug it into our larger moral conversation. Maddie.
Thank you. Well, we were horrified. Bruce received this yesterday, and then we heard it on the news. I will say, to let you know, actually, Harry, that Harvard finally did respond, a little late, but there was a statement from the college, from the university president, signed by all of the deans and administrators. And parallel to that, I believe it was Hillel that sent out a petition, and within minutes, close to 1,000 people had signed on to it. So there was a response. Of course, it came a little late, but it was horrifying to read that and to know that there are students who have such negative, horrible feelings and are able to rally sort of and gather together and put out statements like this in the wake of all that terror.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you, Maddie. Other comments on the Harvard statements, and then I want to plug it into the conversation, but any other feelings that it evokes in anybody? Louise?
Question, what was the Harvard response? No, this is the...
Oh, Maddie, what did the Harvard response say?
They were it was a response that was opposed the remarks of this group and spoke in support of Israel, signed by the new president, right. and then, as I said, all the deans and administrators.
Okay.
I can get a copy of that
right.
if anybody wants to see it.
And it came after Larry Summers.
Right.
That's a good point.
Right.
Just said, what the heck are you doing?
Right.
Nothing. How can you?
Right.
Thank you for remembering that piece.
Yeah. So I want to just talk for a second about the soul of the Palestinians, because and who signed this in solidarity with Hamas. What does it mean when you don't see the slaughter of civilians and innocents? All you see is Hamas. It means that you have lost your humanity. Whereas when you see babies and children rent from their parents and rent from their families, when you see a young 25-year-old woman who is going to have happen to her what's going to happen to her, when you see a Holocaust survivor carted off, when you see grandparents and people with special needs carted off, when you see families broken up, and then when you murder families in cold blood, and you're okay with all that, then that means your soul is corroded, that your soul is rotten, that you cannot see the humanity of human beings, that you're so blinded by hate. These Palestinian Harvard kids are so blinded by hate, they don't care when innocent Jews die. That's why this last page, I'll just read this David Wolpe post. It's on page 6 of the handout. If mutilation, rape, and caged children cause in you a swelling of nationalistic pride, an impulse to parade and celebrate, then your soul has rotted to its roots. And that's what happened to these Palestinian college kids who don't have the humanity to see the humanity of all these innocent Israeli civilians who have been murdered and maimed and kidnapped. And the thing that I'm wrestling with is how can some of that Haftarah be true without our becoming that? How do we hold on to our soul even as we try to exact justice, even as we try to eliminate Hamas, even as we try to prepare the battlefield for Israeli soldiers so that as few of them die as possible doing hand-to-hand combat and booby-trapped urban fighting? How do we do all that and pray for Israel and pray for the success of this violent war without our becoming like these Palestinian Harvard kids, so insensate to the humanity of the other side that we actually don't care if their babies are killed too. And that's, I don't have the answer to that, but I'll tell you, I worry about that. You know, when I talk to my kids about it, I was talking to my daughter Jordana, and I said, you know, reduce Gaza to rubble. And she said, Dad, you're saying you're okay with genocide. And I said, I guess, Jordy, in this limited circumstance, I am, as a defensive thing. And then I realized, how can I say that? So I don't have the answer, but this is a real question that I am wrestling with, and I think that others are wrestling with. So would love your thoughts on that. Maddie.
Well, I don't know that I can answer to that, but I do want to add that what's concerning me also, that this list of organizations, these are not just Palestinian students. These are non-Palestinian students who are participating in these organizations.
Including Jews, by the way.
And so when on the television news last night, when the newscaster interviewed a woman, a middle-aged woman, who said, I'm ashamed, I'm Jewish, and I'm ashamed to be Jewish.
Harvard Jews for Liberation.
Right.
They would have been the first ones in the crematoria.
That's right.
They would have been the first ones in the crematoria. Idiots.
So I think we have an enormous job to be making sure that the message is going out, not just to the other side, but to our own people.
Yeah.
Especially, I always thought it was just these sort of young radical students, but then you see people who are not so young participating that way.
Yeah. So is anyone, I mean, the applause for Congressman Auchincloss and the booing of Markey were pretty resonant and loud. And I'm not a rally type person. It's not my vibe. I'm wondering if anyone shares the disquiet that I feel, which is the moral challenge posed by hate. That, that in order to try to save Israeli soldiers like my nephews who are going to be doing hand-to-hand combat in Gaza, you know, I am hoping that the Air Force of the Israeli military flattens Gaza, and inevitably that means Palestinian civilians will die, and the whole thing makes me just very uncomfortable, and I don't quite know how to think about that tension. Harry.
That's the big difference between us and Hamas. They celebrate when they kill children. They video it. They dance in the streets. They've paraded women that have been raped through the main streets of Gaza with the crowds cheering, giving out candy, and shouting, Allah Akbar. We care. We don't want to kill their children. That's a huge, huge difference.
Thank you, Harry. Any other comments? Yes, Paula.
Well, obviously, it's a question of huge moral complexity, which which maybe can never be resolved. But the moral question to me is not between you and the Palestinians or me and the Palestinians. It's between the Palestinians and the women and the children and the innocents there, because they are just people, and their own, I don't know what you call it, government, but Hamas, who rules over them. They did this to them. They forced our hand. We have to respond, or they're just going to do it again.
Yeah. Can we just talk about, by the way, the so-called innocents, in quotation marks, of Palestinian civilians, including the women? I'm reminded of the title of Goldhagen's book, Hitler's Willing Executioners. And Goldhagen argues that, quote-unquote, ordinary German citizens were Hitler's willing executioners. His whole thesis and his whole book, hundreds of pages, is on the proposition that there were no just ordinary German citizens whose hands were not didn't have blood on them. Their hands had blood on them. They were Hitler's willing executioners. And I'm wondering whether that logic applies to Palestinians. Are these women and civilians Hamas's willing executioners? And how do you assess culpability of quote-unquote ordinary people given the Goldhagen thesis? Paul, what do you think?
I think these people are brainwashed by I think they're completely brainwashed by, they voted once for Hamas, and then they never voted again.
Like the Germans voted Hitler in 32.
That's right. And I have a hard time comparing it because a lot of the Germans were educated and should have known better. The Palestinian mob, the crowd, the street, is that what they call it?
Yeah.
I think that they're brainwashed, but I think it's part of our Jewish thinking that they are people. And I think it's important to keep thinking that they are people. This is terrible what's happening to them. I can't rejoice in that, but we have no choice. We must do it. Because if we don't do it, the same thing will happen next Simchat Torah.
Yeah.
And we have to, what's kept Israel alive is that they show that they're strong and that they are not going to just not fight.
Yeah. So
I wish I had some wisdom.
Yeah.
I have none. But
So I want to just close by thinking about how uncannily it is that right after Simchat Torah, which is when the massacre happened, the next reading is Bereshit. And the first Rashi in Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. The very first Rashi on the first page and on the first verse of the Torah is, why does the Torah begin with, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth? And Rashi's answer is, because the Torah begins by talking about the Jewish people's eternal claim to the land of Israel. And since God created the world, God can give us the land of Israel. And then Rashi says, it will happen that the nations of the world will say, Listim atem, you are thieves for living in Israel. And the answer is no, God gave us this land. And it's just so uncanny how the same arguments never get resolved. Rashi lived in 1040 to 1105 in France. Many of you might have seen A Prayer for the French Republic. And this notion of Listim atem, you are thieves, was resonant at the time of Rashi and the Crusades, and it's resonant today. So I just pray for the peace of Israel and for the peace of its and the life and health and safety of its soldiers. I can't imagine what it is like to be going to the front lines now in Gaza. By the way, the people who are going are in the full bloom of their life. By definition, they're in their 20s and their 30s. By definition, they're leaving their spouse and children to go face a very uncertain future. And they're doing it because they have no choice. And so let's just keep praying. Let me ask everyone to take a siddur that you have at your seats. And let's just end with a prayer for Israel. We're going to, every morning and every night, we are saying Tehillim for Israel. The first one is on page 251. 251, and let me invite everyone to rise. And let's say this together in Hebrew, page 251. This is Psalm 121 on page 251, together in Hebrew. Shir lama'alot esa einai el heharim me'ayin yavo ezri. Ezri me'im Adonai osei shamayim va'aretz. Al yitain lamot raglecha. Al yanum shamrecha. Hine lo yanum v'lo yishan shomer Yisrael. Adonai shomrecha, Adonai tzilcha al yad yaminecha. Yomam hashemesh lo yakeka v'yareach balayla. Adonai yishmorcha mikora, yishmor et nafshecha. Adonai yishmor tzedcha uvoecha me'ata v'ad olam. And then, if I can ask you to turn back to page 62. So turn to page 62. There is a psalm, Psalm 130. Page 62, Psalm 130, together in Hebrew. Shir hama'alot mima'amakim karaticha Adonai. Adonai shim'a v'koli. Tihiena aznecha kashuvot l'kol tachanunoi. Imavonot tishmarya Adonai mi ya'amod. Ki imcha haslicha laman tivorei. Kiviti Adonai kivta nafshi v'lidvaro hocholti. Nafshi l'Adonai mishamrim laboker shamrim laboker. Yachel Yisrael el Adonai ki im Adonai hachesed v'harbe imo fedut. V'hu yifte et Yisrael mikol avonotav. Boker tov.